Hello, friend. Welcome to the first episode of the third season of the Mount Rushmore of Everything. Hopefully you enjoyed our live stream, but we're back and going through magicians today. This name is synonymous with magic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I mean, this, like the term Einstein is used, so is this for magic, and it's Houdini.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Glad we agree.
For the time that he was active and the impact that he has had, and then how far we've come and how long ago that was, that name is still relevant.
Sure.
And that time, magicians were like this mystical thing that everybody was really intrigued by, but was very curious about. And not having all the technology that we have now, as far as communication, it was all word of mouth.
Yep.
So he could get away with a lot.
Sure.
I mean, there are
now
stories.
You get caught or whatever.
Yeah. There are, but then even the acts, right now you see magic acts and they're like quickly, one after another. Sure. Otherwise, you lose the attention of because our span is very short. Yep. But then it was pretty long, and they would go to a show, and it was a pretty long show, and then each of the acts, like one of the famous ones was the barrel with water.
Yeah.
And I've heard magicians talking about how he would do they would put him in there, and everybody was like, how long is he gonna be in there? Is he gonna make it? And by then he was already in the back. He was sitting down reading the newspaper, and they would come and tell him, okay, it's time now. And and they would need to get him a little wet.
Yeah.
So he could also come out and then, ta-da!
Something that I thought was really interesting was how many magicians who are fairly modern day, like still alive, cited him as an influence. And it's like, you never saw this person while they were alive. Yeah. And there's no video of him. I think that I heard there's one audio
Talking
recording.
about followers.
Yeah, but and yet to still, because usually, right, like if you, like a musician mentions somebody that was an influence, it's somebody they saw in concert probably, and they certainly heard their records. But the idea that he's so important that he's an influence to people who would have had to read books to know anything about him, and would have had to seek out things about him. As if Houdini needs any, I mean, if anything, if I were to guess, if you know one name, and I know this is a logic I like to go back to, if you know one name for a thing, it's going to be that one.
Yeah.
There's maybe one other person.
Right.
Maybe that's close. But that one.
Yeah.
You know that one.
Yeah.
Give us another one.
Well, the obvious one, I'm going to go with David Copperfield.
All right. That is my other non-negotiable.
Yeah. He's obvious. He made it more accessible, and so many magicians, young magicians at the time and now, have been influenced by him. The whole idea of make it bigger, he took it too hard. Many of the tricks that he did, it's not that he invented them. He adapted them to make it bigger. And of course, his biggest one was to make the Statue of Liberty disappear. The troubles that he went through with the government, the governor of New York and the city of New York, and of course, this is the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
You don't mess with Miss Liberty there, right? And then once he explained that how he wanted to present it, as what would it be like if there was no liberty in this country, then they saw it as, this is actually something that it's elevating the city and the landmark and everything. And then from there, he was already known, but that's the one that kind of changed everything and made magicians want to be him.
Yeah. So he's the most commercially successful magician in history, which you can say, well, being modern day, he has that advantage. Yes, but that also means he's beating out everybody else today that he's mostly competing with. Also, the richest solo entertainer in history, which is that next level. And yes, obviously commercial success is not everything, but it's somewhat indicative of how famous that person is. 11 Guinness World Records, including the largest illusion, which I believe was the Statue of Liberty. He won the Magician of the Century and also the title King of Magic, which is pretty hard to argue with. First living magician to get a Hollywood Walk of Fame. Now, others have gotten it since that are alive.
Yeah.
But he was the first one, because the only one before, I believe, was Houdini, who also has a Walk of Fame star, by the way.
All right, 2 for 2.
All right, this is where I start to get nervous, but I feel decent about this third one. Sorry. and that is Penn and Teller.
Really? You went with Penn and Teller?
I did.
Okay.
Because we went back to, for me, the name was one thing, right? Like, it just gets points if I'm like, I know that name. And I know I knew that name before somebody mentioned it recently or something like that. So that was part of it for me. But then looking for it, they were another one of the very few that have a Hollywood Walk of Fame star. So I'm like, okay, that's more. Every list I looked up had Houdini or Copperfield 1 and 2. But also every list had Penn and Teller top 5. Most of the time they were like 3 or 4. And then some of these other ones, their time in the sun or their total time performing ended up amounting to like 10 years or something like that. They were since 75, and they, I guess, have kind of they stopped performing together recently, sort of, but they basically stayed together for the entire time. Some other ones were like 10 years, which is fine, right? Like, that's not a great way to necessarily measure, but it was at least a part of it.
Yeah.
And it just, the Hollywood Walk of Fame helped to elevate them.
Well, they have been very celebrated, and they have been very influential. So I don't think you're wrong. I actually consider them. Okay. I just had to pick, right?
All right.
So my third one, I'm going to go with Robert-Houdin or Houdin.
That is my fourth one.
Is that right? He is considered the father of modern magic. Before him, magic had this mysterious mystique. There was this very close line between what it's magic and what it was like spiritual things. The magicians, the performers, would take advantage of that, and they present themselves as this
spiritual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some of them psychics, or some of them having supernatural abilities. Robert-Houdin, he was a watchmaker. And so he was very knowledgeable with all the technology involved in making watches, clocks and machines anyway, time machines. And he applied that technology to magic. He started creating all of these interesting illusions. But also, he would come out as what at the time was just a normal attire. You know, when you have a picture of a classical magician, you picture him in a white suit with a bow tie. That was him.
Yeah.
That's who started it.
Yeah.
Now that image might have changed a little bit. Before, when you said magician, you would picture this guy very well dressed up with the hat.
Yeah. It's evolved into sometimes as the cool guy magician now.
Yeah, so now you have to add classic magician.
Yes.
The classic magician, right? At the time, the classic magician had like a turban and a robe and maybe a long beard. It was different. So he made it more accessible for people, and he showed himself as just a regular dude.
Yeah.
I'm just here showing you some interesting effects or experiments that I've developed. And then, of course, he inspired Harry Houdini.
Yes.
Who took part of his name and just give it a little tweak.
Named himself after it.
Yeah.
So I feel relieved because we are now guaranteed 3 for 4, and you get to bring us home with your final pick.
I'm going to go with David Blaine.
I heavily considered him.
David Blaine was kind of riding on Copperfield's wave. However, he gave to magic another huge boost that no one else had up until him. What Copperfield had done to have everybody jump into wanting to be a magician and make it cool and everything, David Blaine showed you don't need a theater and choreographies and to be the greatest magician. He said, I'm going to go to the street and just blow your mind, and I'm going to record it for you to watch it. And he did. And then from then on, I mean, when you think of the term street magician, it goes back to him. I mean, there are others.
It seems looking it up that he was sort of the main one.
Yeah, but he is the face of street magic.
Yeah.
And then he brought back what Houdini did, which is all the escapes and the endurance.
Yep.
And he's done some crazy things.
Let us know what you think in the comments. What are your 4? Be sure to subscribe. Click the little notification bell if you are interested in the Mount Rushmore of Everything videos. We cover all kinds of subjects, and we come out with a new video every single Thursday. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video. And hey, you made it this far in the video. I'm sure you liked it. So if you wouldn't mind, help us with the YouTube algorithm. Drop that like.
Give it a like.
We appreciate that. And we will talk to you next week.
He taught me, like, all the magicians and inspire me so much for the love of magic because he's my dad. Of course, I'm biased.
Well,
and I had to say it, otherwise my mom would really kill me if she finds out that I didn't say that.
So the Mexican version, we can have that.
Yes.
The American version. It's not Zephyrd on YouTube.
Yeah, we would have